Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, president of Fidelis Wealth Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females. Today, I am so excited that we've got Dr. Natalie with us. And the thing I liked the best about this interview is she said, at one point, she said, the moment I stopped letting self-doubt and hierarchy define me, I found the confidence to project my true self to the world. That's when everything changed. It was truly liberating. And as I think back over my journey, I think that's really valuable advice. It's a really valuable lesson to learn. I don't know whether you need to look in the mirror in the morning and just tell yourself how beautiful you are and how smart you are and how great you are, but the messages we tell ourselves are the ones that we hear. And they're the ones that are going to define our journey and our path. And if we tell ourselves, oh, you're not good enough, then we end up believing that. But if we can look in the mirror and tell ourselves, even if we don't believe it yet, even if you just only say it out loud and say, I'm good enough, and you stop letting that self-doubt and the traditional way that things have always been done, you know in your gut that that isn't authentic for you, and that's not the way that you do things. And if you can stop letting the outside noise define your path, you are going to fly. You will be amazing. Now, you have to keep it nice. Be nice to people. Don't be selfish or unkind or anything like that. But letting yourself really be authentic and true to who you are, I think it makes a huge difference in your trajectory and in your life. So let's get started with Dr. Natalie. I'm so excited that you get to hear her story. Thanks so much for joining us. Good morning. So we're here with Natalie Curcio. She is the CEO and founder of Curcio Dermatology. And I'm so excited to get to hear about your journey today. Thank you so much for doing this and being on our podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's jump in, Natalie. My very first question is always the same, and my stack of books keeps getting higher that I want to read. But what is your favorite book?
Well, I have to say my favorite book is The Price We Pay by Dr. Marty Makary.
Okay. What's it about? Tell me a little bit.
So The Price We Pay paints a vivid picture of the business of medicine, the real issues driving up the price of healthcare, and how we can all take action to fix what's broken. Dr. Makary shows how much of healthcare spending has nothing actually to do with health and what we all can do about it. And what's great is the book is a must read for everyone, in my opinion. You know, at the end, we're all consumers of healthcare. And we all can fall victim to some of healthcare's problems. And he's a great thought leader and storyteller, so he makes these issues really attainable to the reader. And he's actually a colleague and a friend of mine, and getting to meet him after reading the book has really been, life-changing for me. And when you meet him as a human being, you see that in the book, when he challenges the medical establishment to remember medical's noble heritage, which is a call to care for people at their most vulnerable point, you see that as a human being and as a doctor, he does this in his own practice, and that's really refreshing.
Oh, I love that. That's a really great idea too, Natalie. The idea that, if I were to recommend a book on finance, I'm sure everyone in the whole world would go, oh. So that's kind of like, recommending a book on healthcare. You're like, oh, is this going to be way above? Am I not going to understand? Is it going to be hard? It just seems really personable and like applicable to everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I read it in the fall of 21, and I literally bought it for everybody I knew that year for Christmas. I mean, whether they were just friends, whether it was family members, whether it was some of my own physicians. And I think everybody had the same reaction to me. Was not only was it extremely illuminating, but some of the things going on were quite shocking. And someone that's been, I feel like, was in a medical family, grew up in the healthcare system, pursued lifelong dream of becoming a doctor, and now work in the system. I thought I knew a lot about what was going on, and I knew a lot, but I didn't know everything. And so that was the really great part about reading this book.
Well, I love it. You've convinced me. I'll add it to my pile. So, Natalie, tell me just a little bit about your journey. Can you tell me about how you got where you're at today, what you do? That's just kind of a abbreviated version of who you are.
Well, I grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania. My dad was an OB/GYN and my mom was a nurse. So I think when you're exposed to medicine early, it can kind of pique an interest for you. My father was my inspiration for everything that I wanted to be as a physician. And I realized, for some people, medicine is a job, but for me, it was a true calling. And I believe I inherited that from him.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, he was killed in a car wreck on August 4th, 1991. I was 13 and he was 38. And my whole family was in that car wreck. And my mom, my brother, and I walked out of it. And really, nobody should have lived. So that really instilled in me that I had a purpose here on earth that I had to fulfill. And so I made a conscious decision not just to survive, but to follow my passions and dreams that were inspired by my father. And so prevailing through adversity, through self reliance and perseverance was a way that I could honor my father's legacy, but also to really start the foundation for my dreams. And so
Hmm.
soon after that, I actually decided to start studying Spanish. And that opportunity led me to be able to start spending summers in Madrid and developing near native fluency in Castellano. And so I realized I was better able to connect with all different types of people, think in different ways, and become more of a global citizen. And this really ignited a second passion for me in life, which was the study of languages. And later on, I'll talk about I went to Vanderbilt, but it was there that I studied 5 Romance languages and realized I had another special gift besides the sciences and medicine. And being
Yeah.
multilingual has opened many doors for me in life that I wouldn't have had, both through medicine and otherwise, and allowed me to practice medicine on a global stage. So after that experience, I decided to go to Vanderbilt University, which is how I ended up in Nashville in 1996. And, it has been a thriving city that I've called home now for over 25 years. I ended up really loving Vanderbilt. I'm a quadruple door, and I got my bachelor's, my doctor of medicine, my MPH, and my healthcare MBA all at Vanderbilt. And I continue to
Wow.
support Vanderbilt by serving as an assistant adjunct professor in health policy in the medical school and by serving as a mentor to many students who are looking to pursue medicine in many different facets. And so after completing all of my medical training here in the heart of Music City, and my vision was for a boutique style private practice in a retail space that's
Hmm.
beautiful, calming, and engaging, but that's focused on doctor driven, patient centered, and scientifically approached to care. So that's what I've done. And we've been open now for over 11 years.
Wow, that is just an amazing story. I don't even know where to start. I have so many questions. But tell me just a little bit, Natalie, about like you said that your dad sort of inspired you. And it feels like from listening to you, like the accident kind of made you want to live more, live bigger to kind of make up for maybe some of what he couldn't do. Is that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I always was very, my dad said he wanted to become a doctor at 7. I decided I wanted to be a doctor at 3 and a dermatologist at 5. The guy who interviewed
Mhm.
me for medical said school said in 20 years, I was the only person who ever did the specialty they said at their interview. So I'm a pretty determined person. I'm not inflexible, but when I decide on something and set my mind, I follow through with it. And so, yeah, I would
Mhm.
say it set me from a very driven to an extremely focused person. And I wasn't going to let anyone or anything get in my way from achieving my goals.
Why dermatology at age 5? I do not know. I'm like the I don't know anyone that decides what they're going to be at age 5. I
So
love it.
that's a great question. So a couple of things. Well, first of all, my godparents were medical school classmates of my dad, and my godmother
Mhm.
is a dermatologist in Naples, Florida, and her late husband was an endocrinologist. So I had a very early exposure to dermatology when I was younger. I spent time, of course, catching babies with my dad, but I also spent time working with her in her clinic. So I had an early exposure to it. And then everybody in my family had severe acne that on Accutane many, many times. And so I think when you have an early exposure to something, you either hate it and want nothing to do with it, or you think, wow, that doctor changed my life and I'd like to do that for somebody else, which was my experience. Dermatology is unique in that you can treat medical problems, skin cancer, surgery, and cosmetic and aesthetic. And so my dad was a surgeon, being an OBGYN. I always say, I think you either have surgeon's hands or you don't. So I was always dissecting fetal pigs and frogs and things like that. And I always knew I wanted to do surgery. So I did a fellowship in Mohs micrographic surgery. And so I treat high-risk skin cancer patients on the medical side. And then I did another fellowship in cosmetic and laser surgery. So I do injection of toxins, fillers, and I do a lot of laser work. So I'm a proceduralist at heart. I'm not your rash lady. And so dermatology was the perfect specialty where I could combine the care of cancer patients, treat them with surgical technique, and then treat aesthetic patients where you like to have an artistic eye and help people feel better about the way they look, all in one specialty.
That's huge. That's so amazing. And then you said also that you know a whole bunch of languages, and I'm so impressed because, quite frankly, I love traveling so much, and I can't speak English partly. Like I can speak English, but I took 6 years of French, and I can say, au revoir or something like that.
Right.
So talk to me about how your languages, like, how did that work into your career?
Yeah, and it was funny, so Spanish, I spent a lot of time in Madrid. And so that's how I became bilingual. And then I went to Vanderbilt with the intent of being a Spanish literature major and studying abroad in Madrid. And that's part of the reason why I chose Vanderbilt, because they had such a strong Romance language program and was very good for pre-medical studies. And so they offered Portuguese with a Spanish major. And so I started taking Portuguese, and I thought I was good at Portuguese because I was good at Spanish. And then at the end of my fall abroad, I went and spent a month with a family friend in Normandy, France. And they had said that their father spoke Spanish, so I'd be okay because I had never taken French. And I got there and there was zero English, and it was sink or swim. And I'm a kind of person, I like to learn a language, then apply it. Well, there was no learning and applying. It was go for it. And so I just started repeating and saying, like, I'm cold, j'ai froid, or I'm so hot, j'ai chaud, and just learning it. And so I came back to Vanderbilt, and they had a program where you could take a year of intense language within a semester. So I went to the first French class, and the TA threw me out because she said I was a native speaker. And I went to the dean and I was like, I don't know how to speak French. It's going to all come out in Spanish. So she had me take a dictation, and she's like, you're right, you don't know French, but boy, you speak it very well. And so I started taking French, and then my family's background is from Italy. So I added Italian, and I thought, what the heck? I might as well add on Catalan, which is they speak in the area around Barcelona in northeastern Spain. And so by the end of the time of my senior year, I was taking 5 Romance languages a day. And I realized I wasn't just good in Spanish, that I had a gift for languages.
Yeah, that's super impressive. I would get confused, though. Whenever I go to a Spanish country, I had so much French that I will think in French and I don't talk in Spanish, but, gracias all the time. And then English, too. That would confuse me. 5 at once. I am in awe.
Yeah. So I was very lucky. And when I took some French classes 5 years later, I definitely slowed down. But the one language expert said I probably still had the ability of a 5 to 7-year-old in my early 20s, which is why I was able to do that. Just like, imagine if you learned earlier in life, you could probably speak 15 languages, but who knew?
Well, I'm going to invite you whenever I go out of the country. I'm just going to be like, Natalie, come on, let's go somewhere.
Translator.
Yeah, you learn the language. It'll be good.
Yeah.
So, Natalie, if you could look back on your journey and tell me, what is the best investment that you made in yourself? Is there something that you can look back on and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that?
I would say the best investment I made in myself is my education and training, for sure. All of the degrees I have, all of the fellowships, my love of continued learning, the time I spent learning languages and living abroad, and striving to continually learn and improve upon myself, that commitment to lifelong learning. And I tell people, you can get like titles like chairman or whatever, that can be taken away, but nothing can ever take away your education, your training, your certifications, and your degrees.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love the idea of learning. It's so fascinating too. We have a whole team here at Fidelis that is learning as one of their top talents. And I must hire for that because that's the way I feel too. It's like I want to know all the things.
Yeah.
So if you can look back on what is the worst advice you've ever gotten? And did you take the advice or did you ignore it? Tell me a little bit about that.
So I think throughout life, you'll meet people that I call doubters, people who, for some reason or some intrinsic bias, either don't like you or don't believe in you or just cannot see all that you have to offer. And I've encountered those people throughout my entire career. And I think you need to ignore them and disregard their negativity and trust in yourself and your abilities and what you know in your heart to be true. I can think of two examples where it was significant. I had a high school guidance counselor who was absolutely awful. He constantly belittled me. He told me that I was not intelligent. Like, have you looked at my IQ score? He would told me I would never get into a good college and that I would never, ever be able to become a doctor. And I just kept looking at this guy and I'm like, do you see the same person sitting in front of you that I see? Because this is just crazy, ridiculous advice. So I do feel that he was very old and maybe sexism played a role, but he just couldn't see any of the wonderful qualities that I had to offer. So,
Mhm.
some people may have gotten discouraged and just said, well, fine, I'm no good. I'm not going to do this. But I was determined to prove him wrong. And, at the end of senior year, so I applied to all the schools I wanted to apply and I got into many top 20 schools. And I brought all those college acceptances from top institutions in to show him. And you know what? I was waiting for him to say, oh, look, I was wrong. And he had no reaction. He was like, so what?
Yeah.
And he was just an odd man. But I didn't let him impede me from attaining my goals and dreams. And I continued straight to the top. And so, but I can't
Mhm.
imagine if a person had let that person stop them. It could have been devastating and changed the outcome of their entire life. And then
Yeah.
the other
Someone with less
time,
self-confidence or less sure.
yes. And the other time I was in college and I was very excited to major in Spanish. I was trying to, you really had to plan out in the olden days studying abroad because the MCAT was once a year, it wasn't online and things like that. And the pre-med advisor told me, he's like, there's no way you can be a language major and get into medical school. And now keep in mind, in the late 90s and early 2000s, most medical schools wanted biology or chemistry majors. It wasn't like now where everybody wants
Mhm.
music and humanities majors. That life has changed and evolved. I was definitely a woman before my time, but I told him that I was going to major in Spanish literature and I was going to study abroad and I would get into medical school. And he said, well, you better have a 4.0 in that language major and almost a 4.0 in your GPA. And he said, good luck. But he's like, you're not meeting with me anymore. And I thought, well, okay, I just got to figure out how to do this another way. So I accomplished all of those things. I had a 4.0 in my major. I was up for the founders medalist. I was one of the top, 8 graduates in the whole university. And I got into many medical schools and ended up matriculating at Vanderbilt Medical School. And voila. So, know where your talents are, know what your dreams are, but you have to work hard and you have to know what it takes to get there. And so I did just that. But I would have definitely regretted it if I just majored in biology like everybody else and gave up my language dreams, my study abroad dreams, because that was also an intimate part of who I was and who I am.
I would have regretted it too, Natalie, because you're going to be my expert in languages when we travel the world. So
Right. And learning all those languages
I,
changed my life. I mean, so yeah.
yeah, I think that you said something really interesting. You said you have those people throughout your journey or throughout your career, throughout your life that just don't believe in you the way you believe in yourself. And you gave a really couple of kind of extreme examples. It's obvious that they didn't believe in you. But how do you find those more subtle examples, do you think, of people that, like, how can you tell the people that don't believe in you from the people who do?
I think I've been very lucky that I've at times found wonderful mentors who have really changed my life. And so I think when you meet people or you start to work with industry, you can tell the people who really want to promote you or use you strongly to promote their company. And then people are like, I mean, you're fine. You're a dime a dozen. We'll take you for this. We'll take 5 other physicians for this. And they don't really see you as somebody special, and that's more of the subtle stuff. And you need to stick with the people that really see you as something truly special, because it's a waste of your time and energy. And that's what you end up realizing. It's not that they don't necessarily don't like you, but they just see you as like, oh, you can't fill in, Dr. So-and-so can. And they don't even think twice. Where somebody else, if you're supposed to launch a live webinar and you have the flu, they're not going to say, we're going to ask somebody else to say, we're going to move it back 2 weeks until you feel better because we really want you to do it.
Yeah, so you're looking for someone who doesn't take a substitute. They don't think there is a substitute for you.
Right.
You are. That's interesting.
Their
That's a really good way of looking at things. What about, if you look back, is there something that you, and I hate the word regret, I use it, but is there something that you would have done differently? That you would have said, oh gosh, if knowing what I know now, if I could go back and redo that thing, I totally would do it.
So I think there are moments in life where there are things about which you may have doubt or concern. But the beauty of life is that you get to tell your story backward, but you get to live your life forward. And if you're committed to yourself and believe in yourself, things always have a way of working themselves out, and usually learn something in the process. And when you're presented with a tough situation, I think you need to ask the right questions and stay fully informed so you can make an accurate, in the moment decision. And I think if you do that, you're not going to be faced with like a lot of regret.
So like if you learn, maybe that's kind of my mantra is, what did I learn from this? And we will go through a lot of times and say, okay, we had this situation. It didn't go very well for us. As a team here, what did we do well? What could we have done differently? And then next time around, you handle it differently. What is it? What is that quote that says, fail, try again, fail better?
Yeah, right.
But I still do have situations where I'd look back and I'd be like, if I had known the growth that I would have, I would have gone back and done that differently. You can't ever do it. You can't ever go back and do it differently because time moves in one direction. But there are things that I think that, gosh, and I think it helps too, because that way I feel like in the future, maybe I'll think, oh, I would have done that differently. I'm going to do this one differently. What about if you could go back, Natalie, and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell her?
So this is a really easy question for me. It would be get an MBA. The funny thing is I did this in my early 40s during the pandemic, but I think the issue is the 20-year-old me wouldn't listen to the whatever it was, 41 or 42-year-old me, because she would not have understood yet the importance of it. I think only after working in several practices during my fellowships, only after starting and running my own practice, in addition to working with industry, did I really see the true value of getting a healthcare MBA because of my maturity and my experience in life, which is why a lot of time business schools won't take people straight out of college or very young in their work experience, because they don't have yet the work and life experience to really put it to practice. And so, when I took courses like operations, I was like, oh, I do this every day. And people were like, I don't understand understock, overstock. I'm like, I do this every day. Or I don't understand overbooking, underbooking. I'm like, every day. And people just like were baffled by these concepts. But it was so easy. Or things in finance, I was like, oh my gosh, I love finance. But, before you take it, you're almost afraid of it because you're a doctor who never took an econ class, But so are leading teams and organizations, like strategy. I mean, it's so important. But I just don't know if when I was 22, I would have felt that way. I'd have been like, just taking it, course, get an A, do your best, be at the top of the class, blah, blah, blah. I wouldn't have really felt the oomph that I felt when I was taking it and just like giving it. I mean, I would have given it 110%, but not for the right reasons. Just because that's on there.
Yeah. I went back, I got my humanities. So maybe I was ahead of my time too, got humanities, went into finance, and then went back to get my MBA And I feel like that richness of experience that you're talking about, being able to share day-to-day experiences and because the book tells you one thing, and it's sometimes more valuable to hear what your fellow classmates are doing when they're dealing with it in the trenches, so to speak. So yeah, I think that's really valuable. But I do like the MBA. I think it's great that you love finance. I think that's amazing. It's not scary. It's fun.
Counting,
What about
that's just finance.
yeah. I'll admit those accounting classes were not my favorite. What scared you the most when you started your career? Is there something you can think of that you were like, oh my gosh, that's so scary? And does it still scare you? Did you learn, how to face it? Tell me about that a little bit.
So I think at the beginning of anyone's career, most intelligent people have this fear of not being successful. And for me, I was not doubtful of my talents as a physician, but I was nervous about starting my own private practice because it was new to me. And I always say, for my business, my name is on the door. So if it went down in burning flames, it would be like, oh, Curcio failed. I don't just have like Nashville Dermatology, on the door. And so, I had worked in other practices previously, but it's different. I tell people who've never owned a business when you punch in and punch out versus when you have the final and full responsibility of running the business from the top to the bottom and are responsible for the livelihood of an entire team of people who rely upon you, not only for support, but for a paycheck every single week. And if that business goes down and they don't have money for an apartment or food, that falls on you. And so, I tell people, everyone always asks me like, oh, how hard was it to start a business? And I tell people being an entrepreneur is hard. And I tell people, I knew it would be hard. Some people are totally disillusioned, but I tell people it's 10 times harder than what you think it's going to be to start a business from scratch, not just buy someone else's. Mm-hmm. And every year brings different challenges. And I say, heck, we survived a global pandemic. Who was ready for that? Nobody, no matter what industry you're in. But in healthcare, even so, it was like, do we open the doors? Do we treat cancer patients? We never shut down. We always had cancer surgeries available for people. Obviously, the cosmetics and stuff shut down. But, the tough part about running a small business is being able to meet unique challenges on a daily basis and connect with individuals that may not be anything like you. And in what I do, that could be an employee, it can be many, many different patients who come for it. And what I do, very different things, from a huge tumor to someone who wants a little Botox who's 22, to someone who's elderly, and has drivers and things. So those are the challenges. And I don't find them, scary. They're just different. And you have to put your best foot forward. And I always say, when you walk in that door as a doctor, people are scared. And you have to have a smile on your face, and you have to put whatever's bothering you or issues you have at home and make that person feel comfortable, because they're putting their lives in your hand, especially when talking about cancer surgery. And I believe that's your job. That's my job.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's right. And I think that, did you come up with anything that you learned along this path that you were like, you talk about the weighty responsibility of a business, and I feel that we're dealing with people's entire life savings. It's a huge responsibility. We're dealing with teams that we're in charge of. Did you find anything that you felt like, gosh, I wish I had known that earlier, because it is day to day. You're learning new things, you're trying new things, you're seeing if something worked well. But is there anything about that process of owning a business and becoming an entrepreneur that you're like, oh, I wish I'd known that at the beginning?
I think what's hard for me is I'm such a hardworking, driven person. Not everybody views work the same way. And that was at first a huge frustration for me when people just wouldn't show up, or they would just say, my tooth hurts, I'm leaving at 2:00. And not on the doctor side, but on the other, like the front desk or the nursing side, we had people who were less driven. And I'm like, I work with chronic migraine. I've worked with stomach flu. I've worked with respiratory infection wearing a mask. I mean, I'm there for patients. Like, I've got to be dead to not show up at work. but other people don't see it that way. And I know that now, and it's still frustrating to me when people leave, but I know that it happens. And at first, when people just wouldn't show up or just were like, I'm done, and just walked out the door and quit and never gave their 2-week notice, I was like, this crap really happens. And now I'm like, it's my job to find somebody else. You don't work for a corporation that's going to have somebody in the next day.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think the HR
That's
piece
true.
is for me the most
Mhm.
difficult.
Yeah. I would agree with that
And,
too.
and there's less and less qualified people in the workforce. I mean, everybody's got shortages, whether you talk to people in restaurants, people working in hospitals, it's very hard to find good people. And so if a sort of good person or a good person leaves, it really puts you out, and everybody on the team feels it.
Yeah. And it's hard to develop that. I'm a pretty analytical person. I feel like you might realm
Yes.
in that analytical
Yeah.
phase too. And the softer skills or the people connection and stuff like that. Sometimes it's harder for me. I have to practice at it a little harder.
Mhm. Or when you do invest a lot of time in people, and then they just completely leave anyway, and they don't, you feel like you had a relationship and they just don't respect it. That's also very difficult for me because I'm a very caring, loving person. And so when I do invest in people and they just still walk, it's very
Yeah.
difficult for me.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. I think that relationship piece is really hard to navigate. And I would agree too that it's one of the things that you don't really know about owning your own business and being an entrepreneur, that it took me a while to learn and practice and get good at it. So, what about any unique challenges because you were a woman?
So for me, I think that unique challenge would be combining business and medicine as a physician. I do a lot of work with industry, like key opinion leader, consultant, speaker, product development, all of those things. And so at times when I would ask for a bigger role or offer to do things, I got pushback when I didn't have an MBA. So then I was like, the pandemic came. I said, I've been thinking about it for a few years. This is my perfect opportunity. Have a background in health policy and epidemiology. I predicted a 2-year shutdown on international trips and meetings, which was spot on. So I didn't miss anything. So I come back fresh, and I talk to the same people, and I'm like, well, hey, we're having this great conversation. You're going over all your finance with me. Obviously, you wouldn't talk about your stock numbers if I couldn't understand it, blah, blah, blah. And then I had a couple of CEOs say to me, well, as a woman, the problem now is that you're overqualified with your MBA. And I just stood there with my mouth hanging open, like you would never have said this to a man. And other people have said, well, as a woman, the problem now that you have your MBA and your MPH and you're a doctor and you have all this experience is you're just too smart, that I don't think you can fit this role.
Is there even such a thing?
Yeah. And I hate those answers, and I think they're excuses. And it's just like the glass ceiling at one point was like, just get that MBA and you can break through it. And then it was like, you got this MBA. And then it's like that too smart. We want someone who's a little less qualified that we can mold in the way we want. And that was extremely frustrating. And, of course, all of these conversations were had with men who still are inviting me to private dinners, who still are picking my brain for innovative knowledge, innovative scientific knowledge, who still are having me look at their research protocols, who still are having me do all of this. But then that's their answer. And if that was really their answer, they wouldn't be having me do all this other things. And so, now trying to get a board seat as a female physician after doing the corporate director's international certification, everybody I'm approaching who's got a seat at the table in healthcare, whether it's a friend or a colleague or, networking, they're all men. And, everyone like taps me on the shoulder and says, oh, you're so smart as a doctor. We'll figure something out. And I'm just like, is this ever going to matriculate into anything? Because, they're like, but you're not a banker or an accountant. I'm like, yeah, I know that. I'm not trying to get the position you give to an accountant as the chief of the audit committee. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a healthcare company that needs a physician for the scientific expertise. So I think it's a unique challenge with where I'm at. And I've seen it with everything on the industry side. And there's hierarchies in medicine. I mean, everybody who's older and is head of all the medical organizations, even though there's more women going into derm, more women in residencies, more women coming out on the younger side, the people that are at the top over age 70 are all still men.
So have you found a way to navigate that? I've talked to other women who are talking about, like, you find yourself a mentor that can kind of help, because a lot of times it's not what you know, as you know, it's who you know. Are you finding that you can find an in those places with?
I mean, a lot of the CEOs that I do work with that I have good relationships with are men. And a lot of the mentors that I've had, it's just the way it's happened. It's not like I've only sought out men, have been men. So I mean, I'm not an anti-male person. Some of my best friends are men. Yeah. And God bless our former chairman of dermatology. Just passed away. He was such a champion of mine and Helkins one encouraged me to do my MPH with my residency. Dr. George Strickland, he was wonderful. I mean, I've had men be my greatest champions, and I appreciate that so much. And so, I said, because I had so many male colleagues and friends at the time, I don't have any hesitation talking to men just as I would women. Right. So, I'm just going to do what I've always done.
You're still finding that ceiling, that place you can't get past.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe it's age. Maybe I'm under 50. A lot of people say sometimes you just have to get a little more life experience and age and it'll be easier. We'll see.
Natalie, you're going to have to start dyeing your hair gray instead of me dyeing my hair not gray.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, as you navigate that situation, and I know you're going to be successful and come out on the top of that, let me know how that worked, what the magic word or phrase or formula was to get past that ceiling.
Well, I will just add one thing to that. So I did have an aha moment in my entire career that one of my loving mentors, Dr. Rick Logal, when I was at San Francisco, had said to me during my fellowship. And it's something I like, a piece of advice to pass out to everybody. And when things get tough, I like to remember this quote. And he said, "You are amazing. Stop second guessing your instinct and start believing in yourself. Only then will you be able to project your true self to the world so that others can see that you are amazing too." And so I think, or I tell people, it was that advice in that day, in that moment, that changed my life. I relinquished self-doubt ingrained in me by the many years of hierarchical training. And I confidently accepted my knowledge and intuition when it came to the practice of medicine. And now I can apply that also to business. And that's when I started projecting a more self-assured image in my personal life. And it really liberated me from all that critique that was unnecessary that many people had given me along the way. That advice that allowed me to have the confidence that I knew that I could be successful to open my own business, just as I had been in everything else I'd done. And so when I hit these moments where I'm like, why can't I get in the door here? Or why can't I get this? It's like, just keep projecting that amazing inside of you, and somebody is going to open that door. And that's probably the right door to be opened. And if everybody can just approach life that way and find your Dr. Global or whoever the mentor is that can inspire you, your life will be so much better. But I stopped letting people walk all over me. I stopped letting people talk down to me, because that was the way it was in medical training. And I told people, you've got to respect me as a fellow human being and physician, just like you do everybody else. And I am eternally grateful for that day that he kind of woke the real Natalie up.
I love that. And it's so true. You need to be your own best cheerleader. And there's so much you've got inside of you. If you can just help others see what you see in yourself, but don't ever stop believing it. Even if they don't see it, don't stop believing that you can do
because
anything.
It's so easy to be discouraged. I said, especially in medical training, where all people do year after year, day after day, is put you down. This isn't good enough. This isn't good enough. You'll never get this. You'll never do that. And he was like, it's time to change the way you're doing things right now. And from that day forward, I did. And it was so liberating, and it was life-changing. And I already was a confident person.
I'm going to put that quote on the show notes because I love that. I love that idea of just reminding yourself how really important and special and great and accomplished and successful you already are.
Yes.
What, Natalie, is the thing that you are the most proud of?
So, for me, there's not one thing or one accomplishment or one award or anything. I think when I really look over the things that I have done, it's my versatility of accomplishment. I did very well in all of my academic training to get to medicine. And as a doctor, running my practice, I've received many awards and I've had many accomplishments. And then opening my own business, going to business school, I've had many accolades in being, a top woman in business, a top woman of influence in that area. And then my pursuit of foreign languages. And I really maximize my ability with those skills, learning 5 languages, living, working, studying, even publishing abroad in different languages. And I think what makes me really, any of those things can make me unique, but it's that kind of trifecta that really makes me stand out in a crowd of people. And I'm very blessed to have had these skill sets and to be able to have pursued them, because sometimes people don't realize they have a skill set till they're 70 years old or something. And to have found them early and to have passion for all of them to be able to continue to pursue them.
I think that you said something near the beginning of our talk as well about encouraging and helping those that are coming up as well. You take those talents and use them to benefit and help others' lives. So it's not just, you that are growing, but you're actually helping others grow as well. So any advice for a young lady who's maybe just starting down this path you are so successful at? I don't know what she'd choose though, Natalie. I mean, is she going to choose the languages? Is she going to choose the doctor? Is she going to choose own your own business? Which one is she going to choose? But say you met someone, a young lady, just at the beginning of her path. What advice would you give her?
So I have a couple of pieces of advice that I think can be broadly applied. So number one, I think a key set of core skills are really important. Nothing comes without hard work. Nothing is going to be handed to you. You need to have perseverance. You're going to hit roadblocks on the way, but you have to keep going and pushing your way through. And then resilience is you have to be flexible. I always tell people, I realized early, I thought everything had to go A to B to C, but sometimes you got to go A to C to B or A to D to C and back to B. And until you realize that resilience and flexibility are key to hitting all the marks to get your goals, you will not be successful. And often when I thought someone threw a huge roadblock in my face and I thought things were done, it actually opened a better door that got me to a better position in the door that I thought I was looking for. So all of those keys are very important and were key to my success. Number 2, believe in yourself and your dreams. Never let anyone or anything get in the way. One of my favorite quotes by Walt Disney is, "If you dream it, you can be it." And I followed that quote my entire life. And my third point is go for it. So apply for whatever position, team, university, committee, award you want or deserve. You'll never know unless you try. I have so many friends that were going to apply to Harvard. Everyone's like, you can't get in. They applied on a bet and got in. Or when I won the Women of Influence Award, everyone's like, you're not good enough to get that award. Do you know how hard that was? I said, I'm going to go for it. I had a dream that I got the award, and the next morning, the acceptance was in my inbox. I mean, you never know. Apply for it. And if you don't get it, apply again. It doesn't matter. So you just got to go for it. And you never know. They'll be like, oh, you're not going to get on this committee. 1 in 50 people are picked. And I got it. So you just don't know what they're looking for. You don't know what piece of the puzzle they're trying to complete. But if you never apply, you'll never know. So, and again, the worst that can happen is they say no when you apply again. So, and then find great mentors and champions in life. People who will support you and guide you on your journey. They're wonderful when times are great, but they're even more important when times are tough, and they will help lift you up back to where you need to be and get you back on track. And people that are more in the middle of their career, like I am now, that includes finding a great executive coach, because those people can be really invaluable. And then number 5, pay it forward. I'm a huge believer in that. Serve as a mentor to others and help support them. I mentor students that are undergraduates that may want to do business and medicine, people who want to maybe get a master in public health, people who want to go to medical school, maybe they want to do an MPH first. I just had my second student get into a top 10 MPH school. My first student is going to medical school. This girl is, second one's at going to Columbia. It's a top 3 program. You find people that are motivated, driven, passionate like you are, and you help them succeed. And usually they're extremely appreciative, and those people are going to do it for the next generation. And it's so important. Yeah. And I've helped so many students get into medical school. I read essays for people. I help people get into, cosmetic or Mohs fellowships, help people get into dermatology residencies, help them with their essays. It's a passion for me, and I love to help because people do the same thing for me. So however you can be helpful to people, I read college essays. I interviewed for undergrad and medical school at Vanderbilt for years. Is just help the next generation, because it's the way of giving back, because sometimes people don't even realize the amount of help they've received. And if you pay it forward as a mentor, like I said, as a friend, that's the best way to ensure that the next generation is on the right track when things are only getting harder.
Yeah. And I think that you don't really know, you're putting all these different things out there, the different ways that you're mentoring and helping and serving and growing that next generation. You don't really know where those ripples will take you. Some of them turn into tsunamis, further on in these people's lives. And you have no idea how many lives you affect and how many lives you change with this one simple thing.
Yeah. I should also include their volunteering. I volunteer for many, many committees in dermatology and health policy because that's what I'm passionate about, and patient advocacy, because we all benefit with better physician reimbursement, better access to care for patients, having doctors stay in practice and not all retire and things like that. So no step therapy and things like that, barriers again to drugs and things. So you want to volunteer your time to help people in whatever is your way of volunteering and helping people.
Yeah, I think that's important to touch on, Natalie, is the fact is I'm going to admit something. I'm not at all passionate about medicine. I think it's kind of icky. It involves lots of different things like fluids and stuff, but I love finance. So giving back into that place is a good place for me. You probably hate, accounting at the very least, right? But finance probably isn't your favorite thing, but then you serve in the areas that you're passionate about. And I think that brings an extra level of joy to those that we serve as well. So,
yes.
Well, I have just really appreciated our conversation, Natalie, and I've learned so much. And thank you so much for doing this for me. If I have listeners that want to reach out and kind of get, pick your brain or get some more information or just ask you a question, how do they get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, www.curciodermatology.com, and they, under request an appointment, they can send a message through that, or they could go to my website and call the office and just say they heard me on this podcast and wanted to get a hold of me.
Well, perfect. Thank you so much for spending this time and sharing your experience with us. I've really appreciated it.
Thank you for having me. I think at the core, we all have had, adversity and triumph, and we all have that shared connection deep down. And by sharing experiences with one another, we all can be better people.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We lift each other as we learn. And I love that you are so passionate about that. Thank you.
Thank you.